Hello and welcome to the Ellen Made Book Club and my December/2025 wrap-up. The first book that I want to talk about, I think I finished at the end of November, but like, who cares? These are the 5 final books that I read in 2025. So the first one of those that I haven't talked about yet in a video is The Garden by Newman. This was a new release. It came out in 2025 and it was a very anticipated read for me, mainly because it's said to have shades of Shirley Jackson and Susanna Clarke. And in case you didn't know, I really loved Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I've been, keeping my eye out for books that have a similar vibe, and I figured this one might. It also sort of sounds a little bit similar from like the description. It's about these 2 sisters who live in a house. They tend to a garden according to this like almanac that their mother has left them. They think they're alone there, and then suddenly a boy appears in the garden and they're like, what are we gonna do about this? And like, why is there a boy here? It's very like, you don't know where you are and you don't know why they're there or why no one else is, and what's happened. And yeah, it's all very like, mysterious, and what's with the house and what's with the garden. And yeah, it's said to be sort of a horror fantasy novel, which I wouldn't say that it is. I would say it's more of a literary dystopia with like a touch of maybe some magic, or like, there are hints of something like that. There are some elements in the book that are kind of creepy and like a little bit more than maybe your normal literary fiction. And it has a very eerie vibe to it, which I really enjoyed. Anyways, I knew that Melanie at A Dark Corner of the Library was also interested in reading this, and I got a bit stressed out because she was going to read it, and I was like, I want to read it first. We had a sort of semi-buddy read where she had already finished it, and I was like sending my updates as I was progressing in the book. And yeah, that was a lot of fun, and it worked out very well that we sort of happened to read it around the same time. Overall, I really enjoyed my reading experience. I thought it was very engaging and suspenseful, and like I wanted to know where the story was going, and I wanted to find out about these sisters and their backstory and like, why is the world like this? I had hoped for more of the eeriness and the garden being something more than it turned out to be, but I don't know, like I don't think that really makes the book worse. It was just like my expectations of it, because it said fantasy horror on the, but I think it's a very interesting portrayal of these sisters, and it does have a very eerie vibe. And yeah, I don't want to say too much because I think it's very much worth a read. Just know that it's not fantasy horror, and I think that you will still enjoy this one if you decide to pick it up. This copy was so nice to read as well. Like the text is really big and spaced out. It's just a very pleasant reading experience. The next book I read, I had planned to read this year, and then I decided not to, and then I decided to read it anyway. I don't know. That is The Appeal by Janice Hallett, which I have seen around booktube, and everyone seems to love it, and I did too. I had such a good time reading this. It's a murder mystery, but it's all made up of like text communication, like texts and emails and notes and news articles and stuff like that, but mainly it's communication between members of a cast, like a theater group. It just has such a great variety of people. Like the characters are very recognizable from real life, and especially like if you have communications within a workplace or like within a theater group or some other kind of like organization where there are people of different generations and different sort of communication styles. Like some are very friendly and like sending smiley faces and like explaining everything and like, well, maybe I can do this for you, etc., etc. And then some are very like blunt and like, thumbs up kind of people. It's also British, so there's a very like dry sense of humor in here, which I very much appreciate. And the murder mystery is also a lot of fun to try and figure out. There were some things that I could figure out or like I saw coming, and then there were other things that I didn't see coming. And so, yeah, I just had a really good time with it. I listened to the audiobook of this while reading the physical book. And like I could have listened to the audiobook whenever, but I think that it's very helpful to see the the text messages and like the emails, and it's just like, you know, because it's split into these little things, I think I preferred to have the physical copy, and I'm glad I did get the physical copy to read it. But the audio definitely helped, like it gave the characters a little bit more voice, and yeah, even more than in text. So it was a very fun experience, and yeah, one that I highly recommend. My next read was another very highly anticipated one, and one that I had on my list of 25 books that I wanted to read in 2025, so I'm very glad I got to this. I figured this would be a book that I wanted to have on my shelves regardless of whether I loved it or not, and so I decided to buy a copy, and that is Women Talking by Miriam Toews, and I'm very glad I did, because I did end up loving this book. And like, I'm not surprised, but it's always, you know, you never know, and so it's always like a relief when you actually do love a book that you hope that you're gonna love. This follows a group of women talking. They are in a Mennonite community in South America, I think it's in Bolivia, and there have been assaults in this community by the men, and the women are discussing to make a decision about what to do next, if they're going to stay or leave, or what their options are. So the entire novel is them talking. They are looking at the situation from every single angle and trying to figure out, you know, what the options even are, what consequences they would have, you know, what each decision would mean for them as people and for their families, for their futures, what meaning it would have in relation to God and like the Bible and their religion. I found this to be a fascinating read, partly because it is based on a true event, and like I don't think this is a, you know, it's not meant to be like a this is what happened kind of book, but it is, you know, based on a situation that actually happened, and that just makes it hit harder. And like it just, I can't think about too much that this actually happened, and like what these women were made to endure is just tragic and heartbreaking and infuriating, and a lot of different words that I don't want to say on the internet. But I also just think that it's such a good depiction of any kind of relationship where one person is stuck and made to be dependent on the other person. And so in this case, it's a whole community that is based on that system, and like it's a whole group of women. But I think that a lot of the things in here apply to a relationship with just two people, where one person is just robbed of their independence and all of their like abilities to fend for themselves. And this just goes so deep, and like it usually does in like romantic relationships as well, with the like isolation and taking away financial independence. But like this goes even further to take away the ability to communicate and like know where you are, and like they're not even allowed to think. There were so many lines in here that I don't usually annotate my books, but in this one I actually like took pictures and like highlighted the pictures of things that just hit me in the heart, and just, yeah, I think it's beautifully written and very much worthwhile reading. I think it's so well done in terms of both like showing the horrors of the situation and like all of the obstacles that these women have to take into consideration when deciding their next move, and also the intelligence and the emotional intelligence of the women, and like the nuance of all of their like arguments, and the way that they talk about the situation is not only like clever in terms of like how to find a solution, but it's also just so considerate of everyone else. And like that might be seen as a weakness, but I think that's a huge strength and something to be admired and respected. And I love this book so much. We're gonna end it there before I break down and talk about the next book that I read, which was not as much of a favorite, unfortunately. That was Never the Wind by Francesco Dimitri. This one is also tagged as fantasy horror on Goodreads, and on the front it says Susanna Clarke meets Robert Aikman in this heady, melancholic, nuanced coming-of-age story. I thought this sounded very intriguing. It made me think of Carlos Ruiz Zafón and The Shadow of the Wind, which I loved. And this one also has a very similar vibe. It's not as long and it's not as like complicated. It's not as much of a story within a story kind of, you know, structure that The Shadow of the Wind has, but it's set in Italy, so like, you know, Mediterranean environment, and that was very well done. I thought it's very much like a vineyard and in the heat of summer, and like you can feel the heat and you can feel like the sandiness of it all, and like how everything is just like burnt to a crisp and everything is just like dry. And this follows a boy, I should say, who is losing his eyesight, or he has lost his eyesight during like the last year or so. And so he's been blind for like 8 months at this point, I think. He and his family moved to the south of Italy, to the house where the boy's grandfather used to live, who has since passed away. And then, you know, they take over his house, which they have been to before, like on summer holidays and things. But this boy, what's his name? Luca, you know, he has to learn how to find his way around without his sight, not only in the house, but like in the vineyard and the area around there, and you know, going to the beach and things. And so there are a lot of things in here that I thought were very well done, like the blindness experience and like losing your eyesight and having to rely on other senses. It's a very like sensory experience kind of book. Another thing that reminded me of The Shadow of the Wind is that there is this like dark figure that seems to lurk around this vineyard. He's kind of creepy and he is scaring Luca a bit, and Luca is trying to figure out what it is. Is it a dog? Is it a beast of some kind? And he tries to figure this out with the help of this girl Ada, who lives next door with her family. Her family and Luca's family are like age-old enemies. There is a bit more to the story, but I had some issues with it. Most of all, I had expected it to be a little bit more of an adventure. I wanted more of the fantasy and the horror aspects. Parts of it were kind of boring and slow and not a lot happened. And then there were other parts where, like, I don't know if it's the writing necessarily. Well, sometimes the writing was really annoying because this is an Italian author and he has written novels in Italian, and then he has written a novel in English, and I think this is his second novel written in English. And it's not that the English is bad in any way, it just doesn't feel like it's in Italy, because there are some like expressions or like turns of phrase, I don't know, things like spot on, and that's not a very like super local expression or anything, but it doesn't feel like something, it doesn't feel like an Italian expression. And then at some point they were trying to stand still, like Ada was like, oh, freeze, you know, like don't move. And then the narration was like, I put my back against the wall playing possum. Just, I don't know Italian, maybe playing possum is an Italian expression. It just feels like, oh, I learned this phrase now and I'm gonna stick it in there. I don't even know, do they have possums in Italy? There were just things like that, and like at some point Ada was saying dude, like she was in the dialogue part, she was like dude, and like who says dude in Italy? Like, I don't know. Use an Italian word, use some kind of local flavor to the language. Like it didn't feel like a novel set in Italy written by an Italian author. It felt like a book set kind of anywhere where it's dry, written by a British author. That was very weird, and it just, you know, once I noticed it, like once, then you just see it everywhere, and that just took me out of the story. And I think that would have been fine if the story itself was engaging enough, but it just, like I said, was a bit boring at times. And I also think that part of the horror itself was that Luca had lost his eyesight, and I just feel like anything can be scary when you don't see it, like anything can be scary in the dark. And so I just feel like that was maybe used a little bit too much. I really liked the sensory experience of the blindness portrayal, I guess. It felt like it was relying a little bit too much on the blindness to put in the scary parts in the story, if that makes sense. So yeah, mixed feelings about this book. I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more if I had read it when I was younger. It does have that like mysterious and a little bit eerie feel to it without being too scary, and with like the age of the main characters. So yeah, I think this is better for younger readers. There are some dark themes though, and it's not like a young adult novel, I don't think. Maybe it is. Anyway, enough about this. And then the final book that I finished in 2025 was a book that I had started in November or maybe October. I had the book out from the library, but I had to return it before I could read it. And then I also had it on audio. So I just wanted to go into 2026 with a clean slate. So I decided to pick that back up and finish it before the end of the year. And that book was Uncharmed by Lucy Wood. It's not a sequel, but it's set in the same universe as Rewitched by the same author that came out last year. This is a sort of cozy fantasy series or universe or like set of standalones, and this one follows a young witch called Annie. She runs a bakery or like a coffee shop, and she uses magic, but no one knows that she uses magic. And then she is tasked with helping this young teenage girl figure out her magic, because she doesn't really have anyone in her family, or like she doesn't have any history of magic in her family, this teenage girl. So when her magic is awakening, it goes a little bit crazy, and so she needs some guidance, and Annie is tasked with providing this guidance. I'm not a huge fantasy reader, and I'm definitely not a huge cozy fantasy reader. I originally picked up Rewitched because I wanted to support the author, Lucy Wood, who I've been following on YouTube for years, and I really liked Rewitched last year, and so I figured I would give Uncharmed a try as well. And yeah, it's got very much the same like heartwarming vibes and the same kind of humor. There's a little bit of a romance, but it's very like in the background, and it's very like wholesome. There's not like, you know, romantic drama or stuff like that. It's just very positive and supportive and just very sweet. Not overly sweet, but it's like, you know, healthy. This book also has some themes of people pleasing and perfectionism and some like toxic friendships, things that I think a lot of people can relate to. And, you know, it deals with like overcoming that a little bit and maybe finding some space for yourself and like prioritizing your own needs for once, which I found very heartwarming and encouraging and just positive. I think some people might find it a little bit preachy, but like if you are a person that can relate to that, I think it's very much like a little hug and just like it's okay to focus on you and do what you think is fun and what's important to you. Like you don't have to meet all of these demands that everybody else is putting on you, or that you put on you because you think that everybody else is putting that on you. There is a bit of a plot as well. I think I zoned out a little bit, or like maybe I listened before bed and stuff like that, so I don't know exactly what happened at the end, but I didn't read it for the plot. I read it more for the good vibes and the positive, you know, message of it, and the humor and the cute characters and the delicious smells of the baked goods in the story. This is one that I would definitely recommend, and especially if you want some positive, encouraging vibes and some relatable pieces of drama, like not too much drama, but like, you know, things that you can recognize from people. So yeah, those are the 5 books that I finished 2025 with. Let me know if you have read any of these, or if you are planning to pick any of them up. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.